Let's start. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Biotech Industry Perspectives live webinar. We'll be looking at the French and the Swiss insights. My name is Luis Vieira. I'm the board member of the Swiss HLG and also Business Development Director at Health and Healthcare in Switzerland. Very happy to be here. Enjoy the webinar, and let's go to the next point, which is the agenda. So we'll have this quick introduction talking about the PCLF and the Swiss HLG. This will be followed by a presentation from Christine Lambert-Goué. We'll talk about the French perspective. Then we'll go on to Aditya Yellepeddi, who will focus on the Swiss perspective. Then we go to a quick Q&A session. Here, please put your questions to us via the Zoom chat, and Stefan will select a few questions to put to the two presenters. And then we'll close off with Magali and Sarah Holland. So, Stefan, you want to say something about the PLCF?
Yeah, sure. So hello, everybody. So I'm Stefan Altaba. I'm the Vice President of PLCF. So what is the PLCF? So on the next slide, you will see a few bullet points. As it was founded in 27 years ago, and by BD managers in the healthcare industry, and I would say in particular from pharma industry. So now it gathers more than 200 members. With now, I would say, a strong dynamics in memberships coming from biotechs. So PLCF scope of activities goes from training session to organization of events such as the annual Pharma Biotech conference, so held usually at the end of the year. For instance, to give you just examples, in 2022, so the topic was the funding of biotechs, and probably in 2023, we'll address different aspects of innovation.
Great. Thank you, Stefan. So let me give you quickly an overview of the Swiss Healthcare Licensing Group. We were founded 21 years ago as an industry body for business development professionals in the healthcare industry. So we wanted to provide a great environment for biopharm deal makers to network, build strategic relationship, exchange ideas, etc., and also share their experiences and best practices, which I think is very, very important. We organize an annual conference, which has an excellent international reputation, and Sarah Holland, our president, will talk a bit more about this at the end of the webinar. We also do educational seminars and offer local networking events, share good partnering practices, and very interesting, we have the startup initiative focused on partnering skills, where we help these startup companies and startup biotechs. So if you want to become a member of the Swiss HLG, please visit our website. And if you want to learn more about activities, it's all on our website at www.swisshlg.com. Stefan, I'll pass on to you to introduce Christine while I change the slides here.
Yeah, so we had the great honor to have this morning with us Christine Lambert-Goué. So Christine is director at Banque de Lubac and Company, and she's working with listed and non-listed company to go for listing on Euronext. Christine spent a couple of years in China to advise Chinese company willing to go public on the stock market. So it was a very, I guess, very interesting experience. And so Christine is graduated from Paris-Sorbonne University in corporate finance. So thank you very much, Christine, for giving this talk this morning. So I let you start.
Thanks a lot for your introduction, Stefan, and thanks for inviting me at the Pharma Licensing Club of France. So today I'm going to address what's next for French health tech companies in 2023. And of course, as I'm part of an investment bank, I'm more, addressing the fundraising standpoint than anything else. So first of all, I will maybe on the next slide present quickly our bank. We are a family-owned bank, and I'm part of the listing and corporate investment banking department. So the next slide, Luis. Thanks a lot. And as Stefan mentioned, we are working on listed and non-listed companies. So that's why we are quite, appropriate to speak about the funding environment in France. And so we perform IPOs, we do M&A deals as well, focusing on public offerings, on fundraisings in equity and debt as well. And we are dealing mostly with small and medium-sized companies. I do 90% of my time is dedicated to healthcare, so biotech, medtech, and also digital health. And also for your information, in 2022, we listed a Swiss company on the Euronext Stock Exchange, which is a sport tech. It's called Bibo Health. So let's start with a presentation of the funding environment for investment fund in France. And maybe to the next slide. Yes, thanks, Luis. So what we have seen is quite a dynamic environment for private fundraisings among investment funds. So in total, 12.8 billion euros were invested in companies in the first half of 2022 in France. It was 2.7 billion for healthcare. That's actually to record. In total, the funds have raised 16.1 billion euros in the first half of 22, which is a substantial increase. We have some large tickets that came in as well, and it's coming from family offices or high net worth individuals. And the French money is only counting for 55% of the total funding raised. That means that also international investors are interested by the French ecosystem. If we go through segments, we can see that, of course, growth funds are having the maximum of the fundraising. It's more than 50%. 1/3 is for private equity, and only 10%, I would say, is for venture capital. And if we look at on the right of the slide, we see that the most performing fundraising segment is, of course, growth. So that's the easiest task, as we would say, for investors, because that is companies with already a large amount of revenues, with EBITDA, which is positive, so net profit or operating profit, which is positive. So that's an easy task to invest in this kind of companies. We just need to focus on the activity. And then we see private equity is increasing by 46%, which is also a good performance. But what I would like is also to see this performance on the venture capital side, which is not the case yet. It's only an 18% increase, which is also substantial, but still, this is an important segment for small and medium-sized companies in the healthcare sector, and those dealing with disruptive innovation, and also being, the larger groups coming for the next 10 to 15 years. So that's a bit of a pity, but let's we go to see what's happening on the next slide. Yeah. So what we see is that the trend is quite good. So investments have been increasing annually by 15% since 2017. So these investment funds are quite popular for LPs and also for funding some companies. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see that the 12.8 billion euros have been invested in nearly 400 companies. Maybe Luis, on the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir, you're welcome. So these 12 billion euros have been invested in 1,500 companies, nearly. So that means that you can see that we combine an increasing trend of funding. So the pool of liquidity for funding these companies is increasing, and also are dedicated to more companies. So that's a good news for the French ecosystem. The average ticket size, in fact, of the investment is of 1.7 million euro. It's slightly decreasing, because before, let's say in H1 2021, it's around 9 million. But it is linked because there are a lot of tickets below 5 million euros that have been invested. So maybe on the next slide, if we focus on healthcare, we can see that, in fact, healthcare has attracted 2.7 billion euros for 204 healthcare companies in the first half, only for 6 months. And we see on this slide that, in fact, medical, pharma, and biotechnology is the second most attractive sector in France, after industrial goods and services, and just before computing and digital. So we hope maybe in the following, for the next 12 months also to see maybe some funding coming from the digital sector, the third sector that will be dragging also and funding some digital health companies. So that's hopefully will be a good trend. On the former slide, we can also see that the average ticket for healthcare is higher than the average one. It's around 14 million, 14. So this is quite also a good message for our healthcare companies. So if I go further in the presentation, we can see, for instance, on slide 10, that we have a very good, a lot of players for different stages of a company. Let's say pre-seed funding, we have quite a large amount of investment and used to invest in this stage, pre-seed stage. So that means it's companies that are very early. Most of the case they look for funding among business angels or friends and families. For instance, in France, Angel Santé is very famous, and they have a lot of deals, interesting deals. We have some science-oriented VC like Dimiter, which are quite very well known as well. And then we have all the funds related to academics, let's say Polytechnics, which is a very large engineering school that have some also funds. So academic-related kind of VC funds as well for this stage. The next stage is the seed stage. So these are tickets below 3 million euros. So most of the case for biotech companies, they already have a proof of concept and they are in preclinical stage. MedTech, they already have developed a prototype and they are doing their first pilot studies. And we also deal with digital health, and we see that it's more the commercial stage which is preferred, and we have already several users. So on this seed stage, we have some where you can see BPI, maybe for the Swiss attendees. This is the French public bank, who is quite it's very present on the French market. Then we have some corporate VC, maybe the one from Air Liquide, which is quite famous, is called Aliad. And then you have some other funds, maybe more dedicated to like Xange and Investerian Plus. These are funds related to insurance companies, insurance groups, which are quite powerful in France, and investing quite a lot in seed players in the healthcare sector. We have also some funds like Venture, very famous in France for everything related to microbiota. So I think if there are some players in this industry, they're quite famous for this, and everything related to biotechnology. So that is for seeds. That is for the seed stage players. If we go to the Series A on the next slide, these are tickets below 10 million euros. As a reminder, we have some regional VCs which are very active, like Go Capital, for instance. Go means Grand West, means for the west of France. So they put small tickets, but in a large number of healthcare companies, and they are more global, but also healthcare companies. Very interesting investment thesis. Then you have XAO, which is in the southwest of France. So you have some regional VC players that are very active on their market. They know the market very well, and they do some very interesting investments. Then you have the VC funds also at the Series A stage that are linked to insurance companies or mutuelle, like we say in French. In France, it's like Maïf Investment, for instance. And then we have the free seed funds, again, say Venture in the healthcare. We have Elbow Innovation, which is more dedicated to software around healthcare. We have Truffle Capital, for instance, very focused on biotech. With Supernova, for instance, there is a spin-off of the CEA. It's more like it's a very science-dedicated kind of fund. We have investment funds like Andera Croissance, also Andera Life Science, focusing on healthcare. So the number of funds in France dedicated to healthcare is very numerous. And we can just give the example of, let's say, Next Stage, for instance, also investing in listed and non-listed companies in healthcare. We have Sofinova, of course, that I need to talk about, which is a very international fund, only dedicated to healthcare and that has just Apollo coming in. So it's one of the top tier funds in France. So let's see, that's for this slide. So if we move on to Series A, it's tickets between 10 and 20 million euros. Again, a large number of funds that are dedicated to this segment. We can give the example of Razeo, for instance. Razeo has just created a new fund. It's called the Neuf Santé, dedicated to healthcare, funded by insurance companies and pension funds. So they are dedicated to healthcare, let's say, at this Series B stage, so larger tickets. Then we have also Cathay Capital. This is a Chinese French fund. They just raised also a fund dedicated, 100% dedicated to healthcare, which is Cathay Health, headed by Eric de la Fortelle, and that is around 400 million euros as asset under management. You have also more and more foreign funds that have a French presence, and funds like GIM, for instance, are also present here. So the ecosystem is quite large for private funding in France. So then we go to the growth players on the next slide. So these are large tickets. It's what I said. These are the funds that took more than 50% of the global fund raised on the private market fundraising. So these are the winners, let's say, if we can say so. So the most famous funds are Ardian in France, Razeo, Sofinova. These are the funds you are going to hear about if you target the French market when investment funds are concerned. So yeah, I don't know if there are some very large companies present today, but yeah, it is more for larger tickets, already mature companies. So, but still there to finance the innovation and the next steps of growth. So if I can conclude maybe on these investment fund slides, what we can see is that there is an increasing pool of liquidity. So that is good for the healthcare sector as well, more globally and also for the healthcare sector. We have seen that there is more funding on later stage. So on the growth stage segment, which is of course less riskier than the other segments. And so what we recommend also today is to get some more fiscal and tax incentives for VC funding to increase this pool for the VC funding, which is key to prepare some new larger companies to grow, because innovation is of course in the VC seed stage. So then I have a part on listed companies on Euronext, because beside, let's say, investment funds, we in France benefit from quite a very interesting ecosystem regarding listed companies. So in total, we have 130 healthcare companies listed on Euronext, 70 plus biotech companies, which is, I will explain later why, 50 medtech companies and 10 companies related to nutrition. So in total, these represent an aggregated market cap of 86 billion euros. And it's like nearly 2/3 for biotech, 25 billion for medtech, and only 2 billion for nutrition companies. So we can see that on number of issuers, Paris is like around 60% of the total number of healthcare companies listed on Euronext. Euronext is a pan-European stock exchange, so there is a platform in Brussels, Oslo, Milano, Amsterdam, Dublin, and also Paris. And in Paris, you have 60% of the healthcare companies listed. So we have smaller companies, we have small companies, some larger ones as well. And market cap, it's 40% of the total amount of Euronext for healthcare. So Paris is definitely the place to be for Euronext listing, because there are the most numerous healthcare companies that are listed there.
Christine, we have about 5 more minutes left. Just a time check.
Minutes left. Okay, I speed up. So biotech companies, in fact, get listed on Euronext, go for a listing, because in fact they need to get some funding very often to finance their clinical studies. So the listing is a good option for them. A lot of companies, let's say Quantum Genomics, for instance, they get financed through OCAPSA, which are convertible bonds with warrants, and it is very dilutive. And of course, this is not something we don't recommend, in fact, to get financed, but still it's an option you can get. So you can see that Euronext is present through biotech companies on different verticals: oncology, neurology, cardiovascular, allergies, inflammatory diseases. So it's a very large range of businesses. And on the next slide, we can see that there are different sizes. What I said, most of them are still below 250 million euros of market cap. So that's where the most numerous biotech companies are listed. So Euronext is accepting some companies that, let's say, phase 1, 2. So that's as far as you have started your clinical studies, this is something that's key for your next. But so you can get listed quite early. On the medtech franchise, so on the next slide. So this is you have 50 issuers, as we mentioned, 25 billion euro market cap, 16 new listings since 2018, and more than 300 million raised since 2018. So again, diagnostic, implants, medical device, imaging, all the segments are represented on the Euronext Stock Exchange. And as we look at the next slide, we see that again, most of them are below 250 million euros market cap. So maybe some smaller deals are also possible, smaller investments are also possible. So in total, since 2018, we have 41 new listings for healthcare companies, and that represents 4.7 billion of aggregate market cap and around 1 billion euros money raised at the listing. Again, the money raised by location since 2018 is around 18%, 1/8 for Paris. So that was on the next slide, sorry, Louis. Yeah. So in total, if we go to the next slide, we can see that the equity funding post-IPO remains resilient. So that once the company is listed, you can, of course, raise additional cash on the market, even if there are some headwinds in 2022. We can see that 1.6 billion euros have been raised for healthcare companies, of which quite a substantial amount in Brussels. But that is the reality in 2022, which was not a very easy year. Then quickly on the next slide, I just wanted to insist on the fact that retail investors, not only institutional investors, are investing. Retail investors in France are very present as well. They're very active on the market and they like to invest, especially in healthcare, because it makes sense and has an impact. So they are also present on fundraisings, for listings, on private placements, for instance. Then quickly on the next slide is Euronext Healthcare new listings. We can see some companies like Iconis on the bottom, which is diagnostic of cancer cells. We have also some other companies in oral care, for instance, Bonif. These are companies we have been accompanying in the last 2 years. So as a conclusion, let's say on IPO, so we can see that the fund raised on the Euronext is in fact lower, is around 1 billion on the last years versus the investment funds is 2.7 billion. So in fact, the investment fund seems more attractive at the first point of view if we speak only about amount raised. But we know that on the Euronext with a listing we have other advantages like visibility for strategic partners. You can attract better talents as well because you can associate them onto the shares. And you need to have like best-in-class governance, and you have also a reporting culture, which is appreciated by the investors. So the conclusion, that's the most important thing. So what's next for 2023? So I already said that 2020, 2021 were the best years, were exceptional years for the healthcare sector because it's low interest rates, strong market, record years for funding. In 2022, we start to see complicated year with dropping valuation, divided by 2 for the biotech sector and minus 25% for the medtech sector. So it's quite substantial. So we also saw about the fundraising, 1 billion raised in 2022 in the financial markets for 45 transactions, but mostly on larger tickets. So in this uncertain outlook for healthcare companies, what can you say? So cash is king. That's for the next slide. So the investors have the impression that there is a higher risk assessment for biotech than for medtech because of the long return on investment, long cycles. Nevertheless, macroeconomics seems to impact more medtech companies, especially on related to margins because of increasing semiconductor prices, energy, inflation, and so on. So that's it. On the second point is about increasing interest rates, which are also making refinancing more difficult, especially for biotech companies. So we had some problems with, let's say, Lysogen that's facing this kind of issue. So there is definitely a flight to safety, to quality. And the sectors which are more supported by the investors are oncology. It's more around 50%, respiratory diseases, virology, and also central nervous disease diseases. So what we see is, of course, I think that's also the case for the Swiss companies, additional regulatory costs and challenges, especially with the new MDR regulation in Europe. that is adding some new challenges around, even more than inflation, increasing wages and so on. It's a real headache. So what we can say is cash is king. Some companies have started to adjust their R&D expenses as investment cycles are long and costly. And of course, for some biotech companies, they don't. Most of them are not cash positive. So if we go to the last slide, so it's really back to fundamentals somehow. What we can say is to get financed, we recommend to have a multi-strategy approach. Of course, public markets are currently quite close. IPO and secondary offerings are challenging, but we consider that the public market should reopen in Q3 2022. I think Q2 is a bit early, but maybe Q3. We recommend to look for alternatives. So that means looking for licensing deals, royalty-backed financing, venture loans as well. And to start to identify as soon as possible potential and ideal strategic partners, big pharma like GSK, Pfizer, or other one, but also maybe other US players that are very active on the French market, especially in the digital health sector, for instance, at the moment. So, tips are really diversify sources of financing, identify the right strategic partners with which you can maybe conclude licensing deals, royalty-backed financings, or also distribution agreements, more simpler. What we see on our pipeline for 2023 is we have quite a lot of take privates, some companies that are listed that want to leave the market because valuations are disconnected with reality. What we see as well is some mergers between listed and non-listed companies. So some non-listed companies take advantage of listed companies that are listed to get some merger or vice versa. So that's what it's also the trend we see. And that's, of course, digital health, more and more digital health transactions, fundraisings, which is a good news for the next steps of the healthcare sector. So what we consider is that we will still have an uncertainty and an uncertain outlook for the next 3 to 6 months, but normally we should be able to see some to go out of this uncertainty in the next 3 to 6 months. So I think we need to stay positive, and that's for today. No. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christine. Thank you very much, Christine.
You're welcome.
So we'll go on now to the Swiss perspective. With Aditya, sorry, let me just get the screen up. Okay, so I have the pleasure to introduce Aditya Yellepeddi. He's the liaison Romandie for the Swiss Biotech Association. He's the main point of contact for the biotech community in the French part of Switzerland. And he has more than a decade of experience in the biotech industry. So thank you, Aditya, for joining this webinar and presenting. So I'll leave the floor to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you to the team for organizing this webinar. Following Christine's presentation on the French ecosystem, I'm happy to share insights on the Swiss biotech ecosystem. And I will start with presenting quickly our organization on the next slide. So the Swiss Biotech Association is a member-driven, non-profit national organization that represents the interests of the biotech industry. We're a team of around 10 people, and we have about 430 member companies in our network. As you can see, some of them members on the slides. These members can be small startup companies to scale up to larger companies. They also include service providers, incubators, and investors active in the biotech space. If we move to the next slide, I can share the missions of our organization that are centered around 4 pillars. First, we work to make sure that the conditions for the growth of the biotech sector are attractive with favorable policies, such as such, we're active in various industry organizations to make sure that the voice of the biotech sector is being heard with decision makers. Secondly, we work also with providing solutions that are necessary for the growth and the sustainable growth of the industry. In this case, we have developed several platforms to support the industry. Most of these solutions are actually accessible to companies that are not members of our association, as our goal is really to cater to the whole industry. And I'll come back to that on the next slide. Third, as Switzerland is an export-driven economy, we make sure that we establish long-term and sustainable international partnerships that benefit our industry, on top of having national and regional collaborations and networking opportunities. We're still on the previous slide, Louis, sorry. Yeah, and just finishing that one. And last but not least, we also celebrate the success of our industry and make sure that the general population are also aware of how the biotech sector is contributing to Switzerland's economy, and to make sure that Switzerland is keeping its status as a leading biotech hub. So now if we move to the next slide, and this is really for the audience, these are practical tools and platforms that we have developed so that you have access to the Swiss biotech industry from your screen and from your computers. We have three main platforms. The first platform is the Swiss Biotech Venture platform, which is a matchmaking platform that connects international investors and pharma licensing partners with Swiss biotech companies. The second platform is a list of all the companies that are active in the biotech space in Switzerland. We have about 1,500 companies listed there. And the third platform is our annual event that is going to take place end of April, that gathers the whole community, which is also a great way to network, attend presentations and panel discussions. So this is all at the disposal of the audience today, and to whoever who is interested in diving deeper into the Swiss biotech sector. So if we move to the next slide, just to have a quick overview of the Swiss biotech industry, and looking at the success factors of the Swiss biotech sector. One must start first by observing that Switzerland has ranked #1 on the annual Global Innovation Index published by WIPO for more than a decade. This, among other, as a result of attractive and reliable framework conditions and strong intellectual property protection, which encourages renowned universities and companies to aim for innovation. In addition, if you have excellent R&D infrastructure and a highly qualified workforce together with a beneficial funding environment, these are key factors to be considered in having Switzerland as the key biotech hub worldwide. And the separation between public funding and free market is actually quite nicely spread, because we have public funding going into research and education to train this workforce. And then free market takes up the funding when a project emerges from the academic world, and then takes up the company creation and eventually the company success. And if you add that to the country's stable political system and the superb quality of life, we understand how Switzerland is a leading biotech hub. Now going forward, and these are also the trends that we're seeing for the past few years, and we believe that these will be also applicable for the next years. The strengths rely really on public-private partnerships, translational research networks, and international collaborations. So if we look a bit deeper into the ecosystem on the next slide, we see that the entities, we see that the entities based here cover the whole value chain of the biotech industry. So from idea to market, really Switzerland has all the companies and all the knowledge and services to make it happen. However, given the small size of the domestic market, Swiss-based biotech companies have to focus on global markets and invest in international collaborations. And this is also the sense of some of the platforms that we have developed. If we go to the next slide, I just wanted to give some overall numbers on the Swiss biotech industry in 2021, which was, as Christine said as well, an exceptional year. Here are some metrics with first capital investments in Swiss biotech companies having reached a record 3.3 billion Swiss francs, with continued strong international participation, so international investors contributing in majority for these investments, and R&D investments increasing to a record high of 2.6 billion Swiss francs. To give you an idea, the industry employs more than 50,000 people in direct and indirect jobs in the biotech sector, and the number of employees in Swiss R&D driven biotech companies has increased by 9.5%. So combined with pharma, the industry, biotech pharma, they represent more than 40% of total Swiss exports, which is now represented by these 4,500 companies active in the field. But again, these are exceptional numbers, an exceptional year. If you go to the next slide, I've just shared some additional metrics for your information, looking at the increase in the life sciences index in the Swiss stock market, then more of approvals and so on, just for you to give some more perspective. If you go to the next slide, it gives the cross-functional network of the biotech ecosystem in Switzerland. And in some way, the Swiss biotech ecosystem likes simplicity. because it happens so that each major segment has almost the same number of companies. So if you look on the left side, 1/3 of the companies that are active in the biotech sector in Switzerland are in the development of therapeutics, R&D driven companies. 1/3 are suppliers and partners of the biotech sector. Here we talk about diagnostics, reagents, and consulting companies, and 1/3 are comprised of CMOs, bio, IT, engineering companies, and the like. So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is the fabric of the Swiss biotech sector. And if we go to the next slide, I'm presenting quickly the capital investments in Swiss biotech companies over the last decade. And we see a steady increase to reach this 3.3 billion in 2021, with a split between 2.5 billion collected by public companies and 0.8 billion collected by private companies. The total revenues for the industry in 2021 has reached 6.7 billion Swiss francs as compared to 4.9 billion in 2020. So a significant increase. And this is mainly due to an increase in product sales, favorable one-time events from collaborations and licensing deals, as well as a general positive advancement on the product pipelines. And as a result of that, regulatory approvals continuing to be at the high levels, as we saw in the table earlier. You're probably wondering why public financing was that high in 2021. So the answer is on the next slide. There have been basically two major public financing rounds of companies that were higher than the average. For instance, with Idorsia placing a 600 million convertible bond on the Swiss Stock Exchange, which skewed a little bit the results. But on average, we see that a higher number raised by public financing than private transactions. And this is also a trend we see on the next slide, if we move to the next slide, which gives the evolution of sources of funding over time. And to connect with what Christina said, diversification of sources of funding is an important message also here. And we see that naturally happen and taking place in the market. We see an uptake in the number of IPOs starting in the middle of this period, and this option becoming more and more common, and its path demonstrating robustness, whereas VC has long dominated the financing industry, has significantly decreased over time in proportion to the other sources of funding. We also see more and more follow-on investments over time, which is also a signal of the confidence in portfolio companies. And as I said, the key here is really diversification of the sources of funding for the biotech industry. In 2021, you can see that there's almost an even split between the four different sources of funding, which also means that biotech companies have access to different sources of capital, and this is also becoming competitive. If we go deeper into the analysis with the next slide, here we see the fundraising split between different regions. So the reason for this slide is also to highlight the main biotech clusters that are based in Switzerland. We basically have three regions that are witnessing most of the biotech activity, which are Zurich area, Basel area, and the Western Switzerland. The Western Switzerland, clearly Basel is enjoying the largest share of financing, while there's a tight competition in terms of the amounts between Zurich and the Western Switzerland. The density of biotech pharma companies and the historic position of Basel is working well for that region for both private and public companies. One notes that there's a small decrease in funding in Western Switzerland for private companies, but this region has also seen several IPOs recently, which balances it. And if we step back quickly, going through the next slide, we see that the number of biotech companies active in the therapeutic side has been steadily increasing. So we can have a net of 65 companies added over 10 years in this graph, while the number of suppliers supporting the biotech industry has been quite stable. So the extra work or activity brought by therapeutic developers is being well absorbed by suppliers for now. And this is also a growth that has been sustainable and sustained by new talent coming into the job market. And when we speak about talent, I want to make a quick overview of the number of employees, going to the next slide. And we see two interesting trends. On one side, the number of employees in private companies seems to be stable or even decreasing a bit, while the number of employees in public companies is significantly increasing. And there are several factors. We have seen that public companies are able on average to raise also more money and able to attract more talent. This is also a need as these companies are growing and are usually larger than private companies. But this is also a factor of some private companies becoming public with time. So as I said, several large IPOs have taken place in the past few years. And so we can also see the result here in the number of employees between private and public companies. And to continue exploring a little bit the metrics, if we go to the next slide, looking at more financials, this slide really summarizes the financial state of both private and public biotech companies in Switzerland. So we had covered before the increase in revenues with product sales and licensing deals and so on. One observation we cannot see here is that on average, the revenues have been decreasing a bit for private companies, whereas public companies have seen an increase. But overall, with this total here on the graph, you see an increase. The same trend actually appears with regards to liquidity, with public companies seeing their liquidity levels increasing significantly. And taking the average on this graph, you see the trend going upward, while in fact, the liquidity levels are decreasing for private companies. And this is also seen with the actual numbers, where we see that the liquidity is 4 to 6 times higher for public companies as compared with private companies. And this is also one of the concluding messages that I will be presenting afterwards regarding the importance of liquidity and cash at hand in these times and going into the 2022 and 2023. Also to note that that our losses are on average higher for public companies than private companies in opposition to liquidity. We also see a steady increase in R&D expenses, but profitability remains a challenge as it is negative on average in the industry. So if we go to the next slide, I have presenting the total exports, and just to give you some perspective on the importance of the life sciences industry in the Swiss economy. In 2021, exports from the life sciences sector, which includes pharmaceuticals, vitamins, and diagnostics, has increased to a record 109 billion Swiss francs. And this accounted for a total of 42% of total Swiss exports. And it was an especially strong growth in the immunological subsegment that includes many biotech products with an export of 45 billion. That means that a quarter of total Swiss exports growth in 2021, 8.8 billion, was derived from immunological products. That includes biotech products like molecular antibodies, therapeutics, vaccines, and so on. And in 2021, their impact was again boosted by human vaccine exports of 5.8 billion that also supported the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are, again, to be mentioned, exceptional year. If you go to the next slide, and this comes back to the industry and also relevant to the audience, one specific element I wanted to mention is the new financing platform that was launched by the SIX stock exchange called Sparks. So this new SME stock exchange Sparks was launched in October 21 and is helping promising biotech companies accelerate their growth with a dedicated and adapted platform. As you can see here, the requirements to be on the SME segment are somewhat lighter than the SIX main market. So this is also another platform that is available for the Swiss biotech companies and the biotech companies at large to be listed on the Swiss market. And if we compare that to the SME growth markets in the EU, the regulations enables SMEs to list their shares and thus benefit from advantages of the listing status and also investment flexibility for institutional investors requirements in the universe.
Sorry, Aditya.
Yeah.
Somebody's left the Serge. Could you please switch off your microphone? Because we are. Thank you. Sorry, Aditya. You got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, works. Okay, so so this is a platform that has been authorized for shares of companies with smaller market capitalization, and you have a comparison with the SIX main market. Now, the next 6 slides, I have summarized the deals that have happened in 2021. If we go to the next slide, yep. So on one side, licensing deals, and on the other one, M&A deals. So here, just a list of the companies, the therapeutic areas, and maybe some other details in a summary. This is really for your information to see where the trend are. We have identified 11 licensing deals. I exclude the deals that are done with, for instance, IT companies or service providers. So these are really therapeutic oriented deals. Lonza being part of 3 of them, which was a company that was also very active in the COVID times. To be noted, also to come back to the subject of the webinar, that in 2021, no licensing deal to our knowledge has taken place between a Swiss and a French company. So there's something to keep in mind as well. So we have another slide with more deals. If we go to the next one, so Lonza, CRISPR, Opseva, and so on, Relief Therapeutics. We can just go through the next one as well. So this is really the summary. And if we go to the next deal on the M&A side, we have listed 12 deals with the Relief Therapeutics being active in 2 of them. And again, in this list, no transaction M&A to our knowledge has happened between Swiss and French companies. Again, Roivant, Relief Therapeutics. If we go to another one, Novamed, Actos, and so on. So we can just move to the next slide. Yeah, and yeah, so that's done as well. And going to the next slide for the conclusion and some perspective. So with the latest data coming from 2022 and also early discussions for 2023, this goes back also to the conclusion earlier. We see a more difficult environment for biotech companies in general, with almost 50% decrease in amounts invested in 2022. So one may argue that this is also a balance to the exceptional year of 2021, where that we recently see, and as a consequence, an overall decline in appetite for this sector. But we also hear that some are arguing that this is probably healthy as to avoid a bubble in this sector. But the healthcare sector in general still looks great, with investors still being active in the healthcare sector, but more going into the ICT, applied to healthcare, or medtech investments. The Swiss Venture Capital Survey mentioned that 50% of the funds that are active in these spaces are going into these 2 segments, whereas only 20% are still active in the biotech sector. And this is also something that we can see in the largest financing rounds, just for information. Within the 20 largest financing rounds, 5 of them were related to biotech, and only 1 of them has seen a Swiss-based investor joining the syndicate, which may also give a signal of caution in the Swiss investment base as well. The next slide, 4 trade deals happened in 2022 in the biotech sector, and 18 financing round out of the 383. So the numbers are also quite modest. So again, this is reflecting on the general trend. And to conclude, the latest news and latest discussion that we're seeing is that the negotiation with investors are getting more difficult, especially for private companies, and having a difficult liquidity position is definitely not helping. But still, we see a flow of money coming from international investors, which is important to the Swiss-based companies. And then the IPO numbers also decreasing, and the valuations going down as well. This also links to the presentation earlier. And last but not least, we've seen the past few days, we'll have to see how the Silicon Valley Bank story will also affect the industry in 2023. So many more interesting discussions to be held in the coming weeks and months. So I look forward to continuing the discussion with everyone. And I'll stop here and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aditya. Very interesting. So now we'll go to the Q&A session with Stefan. Stefan, you have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, so well, what I suggest is, as you didn't use the chat box to share with us some questions, so maybe I suggest to have a live session. So if you want to unmute, and if you want to ask a question to either Christine or Aditya. In the meantime, maybe I can start this session and ask you a question, Aditya. Actually, it's for Christine as well. I think that Aditya, you have mentioned that investment in 2022 in biotech fall by 47%. There was less investment in biotechs compared to other sectors. Also, IPO decrease. But on the other hand, you've mentioned that there's more built-up M&As and maybe also licensing deals. You have mentioned many of them. So do you think that is mainly due to what Christine has mentioned, dropping in valuation on eventually in market cap, making more difficult this kind of financing?
Yeah, so the list of companies was related to 2021, and the decrease in the valuation and so on are in 2022. So we believe there is a link between the two. If there's a lot of investments that have happened in 2021, then naturally the cycle of investments will slow down for 2022. At this stage, this is only what we can see. As I said, the healthcare sector in general is still on an upward trend, but probably healthcare investors are also trying to diversify their portfolio. There's been a lot of excitement in 2021 with the pandemic and going into biotech sector. So that's much of what I can say, because there are two different periods, very, very different in terms of the dynamic in the biotech sector.
Okay, thank you. So Dominique, I think you want to ask a question. Yeah.
I had actually two questions. One from the Swiss side. I mean, I know Switzerland is great and you have a lot of interesting companies, and also the big pharmas are there. Now, is there also, do you have the same statistic if you remove the Novartis and the Roche of the world, and then you just focus on the biotech? Does the picture then looks like much more comparative to French side, or where are the superiority or something like that? So because I am assuming to some extent that on both sides of the border, you get same type of knowledgeable people, competent people, and to some extent, I would be very curious to understand if there is really a preference to go to Switzerland or to go to France. So that my first question for the Swiss side, and the other question that I have is regarding the Euronext, sorry. Well, I have been worked with a lot of, let's say, Anglo-Saxon people and so on. They dislike completely Euronext. And I heard sometimes from people used to try to go to, of course, the NASDAQ, that Euronext is like the cemetery of the biotech companies if you want to go to an IPO. I know it's quite controversial, but what is the view on that? Because you have really less liquidity than what you can get in the NASDAQ.
So maybe Christine, you can answer to this last question first on the reputation of Euronext and truth on that. You have to unmute, Christine.
So sorry, yes, I understand your point of view, Dominique, on the Euronext market. The thing is, it all depends on different factors. First of all, the stage of the company is difficult. We have been dealing with companies that are duly listed on Euronext and NASDAQ. So of course they start, because they are a French company, they start with Euronext listing and then they go for dual listing later on. But it depends on the stage of the company as well. So they can start with funding, getting access to funding on Euronext to start with. And then at some point, maybe look for a NASDAQ listing. But that depends on the stage of the company. And the second point, which is very important, and that is not that's important to consider, is that most of the companies that do a lot of efforts for the IPO, and then they forget to continue to communicate and to get to get visible after the listing. So once you are listed, it's the beginning of a story. It's not the end of the story. So they need to continue to communicate, to be active, and among the ecosystem, the investors, also strategic partners. So they need to do the efforts, and sometimes they're lowering down their efforts because they do the large effort for the IPO. So that is it. So I think visibility is key after post IPO, and you need to work on the liquidity and so on. That is key. Some companies are not doing this effort, but and then it depends on the stage of the company as well. So for early stage companies, I think Euronext is fine. Then at some stage, maybe you can look for a dual listing, but depends on the maturity of the company. I hope I answer your question, Dominique.
Okay, thank you. So as we are running out of time, maybe Aditya, can you answer to the first question by Dominique regarding, I think, Swiss Biotech?
Yeah, and yeah, to mention that there are very talented people on both sides, on French side and Swiss side, of course. What we can say on the Swiss side is that one of the particular elements, and I would also love to get Christine's view on this, is that here we have big investments into public investments into the early stages of future innovation. That means going into technical schools, the École Polytechniques here, and universities, they are getting a lot of funding from public money to create this infrastructure and have this training of a workforce that is extremely skilled. And although there's a shortage of talent, but we are investing heavily on that. And then as soon as there's a transition into the market, so when an innovation really becomes something that can be potentially marketed, the idea gets confronted very quickly to the market, to the financing difficulties, let's say, so that there is a stress test at that stage that helps in filtering out the potential products or projects that are going to be successful. And so this split between public and private financing, so public sector financing, private sector financing, is one of the key elements that we see here. And also because in Switzerland, 99% of the companies that are active in Switzerland overall are SMEs. So we have large number of small SMEs, and then a very small number of very large multinational corporations. So there's a link between all of them to sustain this ecosystem, which makes it a success. And then the IP protection and the innovation around IP in general is also very favorable in this case. So these are maybe some of the elements that could be explaining as to why Switzerland is being well positioned. Not to exclude the fact that, as I said, with the domestic market situation of Switzerland, there's also more openness in contributing to the outside world and to establishing collaboration. So this collaborative spirit is also very well immersed into the thinking of the entrepreneurs and directors.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think that we have to close this session. I just want to mention a question by Stefano regarding the crash of the recent crash of Silicon Valley Bank, and would it affect biotech startup environment? Very quickly, if you want to have a comment on that. Do you think it will affect our sector or not?
It could potentially affect especially the most innovative companies, let's say, because they were focusing on startups mainly. So maybe the digital health, sector could be affected. But I think it looks like the markets are recovering already after this news. So it looks like it has been well controlled by the US central bank and so on. So I think definitely it could affect, but I think it's slightly. I don't think it will affect too much. Definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's a question regarding the availability of slides. So Luis, I think, do you think that the slide will be available?
We'll put the recording on the website.
Okay, and maybe summaries if available by the person who presented. Okay, so now we are ready for maybe a conclusion.
The closure, we go to Magali and Sarah, please. So Magali and
yes,
Sarah.
really quickly because it's already 10. So thank you very much, Magali, President of PLCF and Portfolio and Strategic Development for Director for Viatris in France. So thank you, Christine and Aditya, for this really great insight of the biotech industry perspective. Thank you for sharing. Thank you also, HLG, for this great collaboration around the webinar. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Sarah. It is a first, but I'm pretty sure it's not the last, and another events will come soon. And during this next event, we will be able to share more info concerning our event, our biotech, pharma biotech event that we organize every year, and it will be organized at the end of this year in November or December. So we will share more info at that time. And thank you for attending. And So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Magali. I'm Sarah Holland, the president of the Swiss HLG. And again, I'd like to express huge appreciation to our wonderful speakers and the organizing team. I hope you found this interesting and informative, and a recording will be available on our website, and we'll send a survey and look forward to getting your feedback. I just wanted to close up by highlighting that our annual flagship conference is coming up on May 7 to 9. And if you came to the Jubilee conference last year, you'll be familiar with the wonderful venue at the Hotel Majestic right on the lake at Montreux, and the great atmosphere for networking. Our theme this year is the provocative question: is the biopharma industry sustainable? Which could be viewed from different perspectives like pricing, business models, supply chain, environment. And as you can see, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers who'll give us real life insights into these topics. So we really hope you'll join us in Montreux, and to learn more, again, please visit our website. And thank you so much for coming to our first joint webinar. We look forward to hosting future webinars in the future on other interesting topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a nice
Bye.
day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.